Hi, I'm Maggie Palmer, and today I wanted to talk a bit about a subject that's become quite contentious over the years, and that's the subject of Reiki energy healing. As mentioned in my last video, I've been working with energy healing for 25 plus years now, and as part of my journey of studying and working with energy healing practices, I came across Reiki and went on to learn how to work it, and then became a Reiki master teacher. So I teach other people Reiki as well. I still do, but it's a bit of a Marmite method which divides people, and everyone seems to have strong opinions about it one way or another. And of course, everyone's entitled to their opinions, and I fully respect them, and I fully respect people's personal experiences with whatever it is that they're talking about or referring to. I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is my own experience. And I think because it's something I still choose to work with, I still choose to teach, it felt important to discuss my own experiences and my reasons for choosing to continue to work with it. And as always, anyone listening, I would expect you to tune in for what's intuitively right for you as you listen to me. And if it doesn't sound like your thing or your way, then respect that. And if it does, then maybe look into it, pursue it, whatever you feel called to. But primarily listen to yourself and your own reactions, because once you tune into that, it doesn't let you down. So, as I mentioned in my last video, I lost my father at the age of 18, and I loved him dearly. So this was a great blow to me. Actually, at that point, I went instantly grey overnight, and only stopped battling with that probably in the last 5 or 6 years, and stopped trying to diet and cover it up after years of trying to pretend it wasn't there. So it was a huge shock to me. It was very traumatic, and I was grieving very heavily, but I also wasn't dealing with it terribly well. And I was going through suicidal ideation. I was travelling into college in London, where I lived at the time, in North London, and I had moments where I would stand in front of the tube tunnel as the tube train was approaching, and would think to myself how easy it would be just to fall in front of it, and then I'd be reunited with him. And of course, these are things that you don't discuss with other people, and you question your sanity. But now, with a broader perspective, I understand that it's quite normal if you're grieving or suffering or traumatized to have those thoughts and not necessarily seriously contemplate following through. And I didn't, but I knew I was struggling, and I needed help. So I went to my GP at the time, because that's what you do. Family doctor, surely they're going to want to help. And told her I was struggling, and told her my reasons why, and I knew I understood why I was feeling depressed, and I wanted to be put on, I asked to be put on a waiting list for a psychotherapist. And the instant reply was a very abrupt, no, that could be a minimum of 6 months, and you need help now. So I'm going to write you out 2 prescriptions for 2 different antidepressants. I suggest you start taking those, and we'll see where we go. And there was no warmth, no bedside manner whatsoever, no real interest in hearing what it was I was asking for and what I wanted. And knowing I wasn't being heard, I just took them and then tore them up. And that started, as I mentioned in my last video, a process of me looking into alternative methods of healing and trying to find other ways to support myself to heal from the pain that I was suffering from the loss of my dad. And around about maybe 6 to 8 months after that, I walked into a local shop. It was sort of like a charity shop, but it wasn't. It was like a secondhand clothes shop. And met a wonderful woman who became my first real spiritual teacher, outside of the Catholic faith, which I was raised in. A lady called Tracy Antonio, beautiful soul, who's still practicing healing and teaching people in North London. And we clicked instantly, and she was able to tell from just a few words in conversation that I was a Gemini, and I found that very interesting, because I've always been interested in astrology. Self-taught. I wouldn't consider myself an astrologer at all by any stretch. There are huge gaps in my knowledge, but I've always been attracted to the subject, and I've learned what I could and absorbed what was of interest since a child, even though I had no one around me who was shown an interest. I think it was inherent. So we clicked on that, and she said that she was about to run a spiritual and psychic development class locally, and asked me, did I want to partake in that? And I instantly said yes, because I felt I probably needed a bit of a mentor and knew I wanted to explore other options for healing. So my first experience of hands-on healing was with her, and she's a very gentle soul, has a Native American look about her, even though she's Greek. Was telling me that she had native guides, and I just felt incredibly safe in the space that she'd created. I was about 19, and she was in her very early 40s at the time, so a fair bit older, and had done the rounds of all the local spiritual churches, and had experienced a whole spectrum of experience and practiced all sorts of techniques, and was a wonderful teacher in teaching us, those that came to her class, energetic sovereignty and personal power, in the sense of making it very, very clear to us that if you were to do any kind of energetic work, you have to go in with the attitude that there's nothing out there that's greater in power than you, and that you are equal to anything that you meet in the seen or the unseen realms, as long as you don't take silly risks and you follow certain rules and you set certain intentions and you align yourself with highest good and the divine source of all things. So the form of spiritual healing that she practiced, she didn't give a name to, other than it was spiritual healing, it was energy healing. And I just felt the most profound sense of peace, led on her couch and receiving this healing and energy from her, and felt very safe, felt nurtured, loved, supported, comforted, felt beautiful. And I thought, this is something I'd love to learn to do. And actually, it's just being reminded now that growing up, raised as a Catholic by two Catholic parents, and going to Catholic schools all my life, I wasn't really exposed to this subject, except for on one occasion where I overheard my parents talking about a family friend who had been really sick and had sought medical help and hadn't received it, and then had gone to see a faith healer and had had a miraculous recovery from whatever ailment it was, which I can't recall at this time. And I remember my ears pricking up. I must have been about 5 or 6, so very young, and thinking, what's a faith healer? That sounds interesting. And going to my mum and asking her, and her explaining, well, it's when you're not well and you go and see somebody and they make a connection to God, God of the Catholic faith in her parlance, and through their faith in God, they then help you to have a miracle recovery. I remember being fascinated by that and thinking, well, isn't that wonderful? I must have squirreled it away somewhere. I'd always had a sense of that I had a purpose and that I wanted to serve and support others, and that never really changed. So I guess I was meant to hear that, and my ears were meant to prick up back then, so that when it came into my reality again later, it would feel familiar. So anyway, I learned the basic principles of hands-on healing, and I started to practice it in the classes, and paired up with other people, and could feel that I had an ability. I would argue that anyone can do it, but you have to have an inclination to begin with, and that in my experience, the more healing a person has done on themselves, the better an experience I've had on the receiving end of any healing that they've given me, because I think the channel is important, and you yourself are the channel when you're working with energy healing. But I absolutely loved it, and I was getting good results working with other people. I loved the fact that I had this ability just with my bare hands to make someone feel better. And it didn't require medication, or that anyone had to sit and talk lengthily about what they were struggling with. That you could just touch somebody, or even just have your hands near them, and you could affect change in their emotional well-being. I thought that was amazing. So I was practicing that for a while and had some wonderful experiences. One with a family member who'd had back problems for a very long time, and I gave one treatment to him, and he'd spent a fortune on chiropractors and osteopaths and all sorts, and no disrespect to any of those traditions because they're all wonderful. I've had great experiences myself, but he hadn't had relief, and it just took one session of basic hands-on healing, with me just playing around and holding the intention that I wanted him to get better, and he stopped experiencing pain from that point. So, experiences like that, and I had a few, led me to understand that this was a potential path for me, and I just again really enjoyed it. And then one day in this spiritual and psychic development class that I was attending, a chap turned up, American guy who I'd never spoken to before, and he and I got paired up to give each other healing. And he said, I practice Reiki. And it was the first time I'd ever heard of it. I said, okay, look forward to seeing what that's like. And it was a different experience for me. It was probably more intense. And I can't explain why, because I don't believe that it's any form of energy healing is any better. I don't believe there's a hierarchy. But my experience of what he gave me was very profound. I was sat on the ground. He was stood behind me, had his hands on my shoulders. And it was probably about half an hour that I was sat there receiving his energy. And I curled up into a ball and very quietly had an emotional release that it was dark in the room. There's no way he would have been able to see. That's what I was doing, and I was being private about it. And at the end, he said to me, "Okay, so you're carrying a burden of grief that's really heavy to do with the loss, and you're not dealing with it because you're prioritizing other people's emotional needs over your own, and it's going to become really important that you look at that. Otherwise, it's going to fester and it's going to cause health issues later on down the line." And of course, I'd lost my dad about a year or so before, and I was living with my mum and my little brother, who's 5 years younger than me. And I was pushing all my own pain aside to try to be an emotional support for both of them. And obviously, that's not healthy. So he was able to see that, even though he knew nothing about me. And he also said, you have a dairy intolerance, which if you don't do something about it, or if you don't stop eating as much, because I have a thing for dairy and always have, that's also going to cause you health problems. And I didn't know that. The sniffing I'm doing, by the way, is because I had some dairy yesterday, and it still activates my sinuses. So he was absolutely right. And I back then I was having permacolds, constantly having a cold, one after another. But then I pretty much lived on cheese because it was my favorite thing to eat, and I had way too much dairy in my diet. And much later on, I learned that that was only a problem because of heavy metals and mold and other issues in my body that meant that when I have dairy, it triggers certain responses, including sinus issues, which are healing now, which means that I can have a little bit more from time to time. It's not so much of a problem, but I did have a bit more problem than I should have yesterday. So apologies for constant sniffing. So I was amazed that he was able to know all of this just from popping his hands on my shoulders. And he was a lovely, gentle guy. And I felt so good for having a really good cry, which I hadn't allowed myself to do because I'd just been on autopilot and pushing on, worrying about other people, not thinking about myself, which was another pattern that I needed looking at later in life, which I have now addressed. So that was my first experience of Reiki, and I didn't then go off and go, oh, I must learn how to do Reiki because I already knew how to do energy healing. So I just carried on doing that sort of in the closet for another 8 to 10 years, just giving people healing as and when I felt called to, not charging for it, because it was still something that I felt was almost taboo. I guess being raised in the Catholic faith, there was some stigma around whether it was godly or not. Although my experience of it was that it was. And over time, my mum came to love it and came to even ask for it from me. And she was a staunch Catholic. I guess there was stigma of some kind that was holding me back and stopping me from stepping fully into that as a way of working with others. And it was around about the age of 27 that I was made redundant twice in 1 year. Totally unfortunate circumstances, and found myself in a state of real despair. And I'd been going from I started working in a supermarket as a kiddo, and then it was admin jobs, secretarial jobs, reception-based jobs, and throughout my 20s, none of which I had any passion for, because I didn't feel, I was still recovering from the grief of losing my dad, I think, but I still didn't feel confident enough in my own abilities as a healer to step fully into doing that. So I had one night where I was in high despair around the age of 27, and I threw up a prayer because I knew I had to go to the job centre the next day and try to find a job. And I knew that my heart wasn't in doing any of it. I just wanted to know what I was here to do and what my purpose was. So I threw a prayer up, a heartfelt prayer to God, and said, please show me, please show me what I'm here to do, and please support me to find my way to doing it, because I can't carry on like this, doing these dead end jobs that mean nothing to me and are slowly destroying my soul. And it was, looking back, losing the 2 jobs in a year was a wake up call for me, to start me back on that journey. I'm sure of it. And that was about 4 o'clock in the morning. And the next morning I had to get up. Well, I obviously went to sleep, and then later that morning I had to get up and go to the job centre. And I did something that I never do, because I never used to watch This Morning, which is a very cheesy UK morning breakfast show. Not my kind of thing at all. I was inspired to put it on just as I was about to leave the house, and there was a woman being interviewed who was an energy healer and had her own retreat in Cheddar in Gloucestershire. And I sat there transfixed, watching her story, listening to her story, and was reminded that in my early 20s I'd had a vision that one day I would have a tiny bit of land somewhere where I could build a retreat, a nature-based retreat, where I could offer healing and courses, and reintroduce people to nature, and just take jaded people and help them turn their lives around and find themselves, using the techniques that I was using to help me find myself at the time. But I lost my way and I'd forgotten about that dream. And as I was watching this woman talking about hers, suddenly I was reminded that this is what I always wanted to do. This was the closest I'd come to having an idea of what it was that I wanted to do, and this woman had done it. And she had learned Reiki and had developed her own form of Reiki. And I was absolutely fascinated, and I actually wrote to her and asked if I could work with her. And it almost happened that I got kind of a scholarship to go and work with her, but then I had a bike accident, smashed up my face and my teeth, which had to be fixed. And again, looking back, it's almost as though I was being redirected, and it wasn't her form of energy healing that I was meant to learn at that time. I wasn't meant to follow somebody else necessarily. So then I'm still looking for work, and as part of being in the process of job searching, I was offered a chance to do a couple of courses for free. And one of those courses was called Improve Your Lifestyle. And I didn't know anything about it, but I was told by a couple of other people, oh, that's a really good course, apparently. The teacher's really good. You might want to look at that. It might be your sort of thing. So I just went along with no expectations, and it turned out that it was essentially Reiki. A beautiful Indian Reiki master, Darshana Videra, who ended up teaching me level 1, level 2, and level 3. So I started learning Reiki properly, and again was just having wonderful experiences of working with it, and got into healing myself on a daily basis, because that's something that you need to do in order to qualify. And stopped wanting to eat rubbish as much. Certainly it made a big difference. Wanted to stop smoking after 10 years of smoking and trying to give up. Was able to, with a combination of things, including the self-treatment, the daily self-treatment I was doing with the Reiki. And it just began to transform my life in so many positive ways. And again, I was having lovely experiences working that technique with other people, and was reminded how much I enjoyed doing it. And then when I qualified a couple of years later, level 3, and I decided I was ready to start putting myself out there tentatively and professionally working with it. So I did start working at a local health food store who had some therapist rooms at the back and had some quite interesting initiatory experiences of working with it, with some interesting characters that came in, which I'll maybe talk about another time. And then before too long, I found myself in a garden centre in Enfield. And around the back of the garden centre in the car park, there was a little shop that was alternative, spiritual themed. And I went in and overheard the guy behind the counter saying that they were looking for a Reiki master. And I, again, just qualified and approached him and said, I couldn't help overhearing you were looking for a Reiki master. I'm newly qualified and I'm looking to start teaching. Would I be a good fit? And I ended up starting workshops running from that place and taught small groups of people, thoroughly enjoyed it, loved watching people come alive and wake up with a passion for this kind of work and seeing the difference in other people that I'd seen in myself, and sharing something that I had, real passion for. I really, really enjoyed it. But it was there that I had my first encounter with somebody who made me question whether everybody who was doing this was in it for the right reasons. And this was another Reiki master who got brought in to do courses and workshops there and to practice there, and who I guess must have just been quite a competitive character. Not really in my nature. I mean, it's in everyone's nature, isn't it? But it's not something I cultivate in myself or admire in others. And she took me aside into a room one day and started grilling me about my knowledge of Reiki and asked me if I knew of a certain precept of Reiki. And I said I didn't know much about it because it wasn't something that my teacher had covered. And then it was all one-upmanship and, oh, how can you not know about that? Because it's one of the most important things. And then Sam did a very dramatic demonstration of what this process looked like, and basically said to me, it insinuated that I couldn't really be a proper Reiki teacher if I didn't know how to do that, and I wasn't doing it every day. And elevating herself, and yeah, that was difficult. I'm about to be interrupted. Are you recording my Okay. Excuse me. Um, so that was maybe my first experience, and perhaps I was lucky that I was, nearly 30 and I hadn't come across anyone at that point who was so-called spiritual or working with energy healing, that perhaps wasn't. Um, how do I put this nicely? Um, that was coming from a wounded place, and projecting their wounding on other people. And it was later discovered that she was a bit of a charlatan and that she was using some quite unpleasant marketing techniques to try to pull people in. Anyway, I won't go into that. But it showed me that perhaps there was a level of, again, for want of a better word, some level of purity that I was coming with my attitude to this, that not everybody brings to the practice of healing. And it was an eye-opener. And then there were other people that I met in that place that showed me that to be spiritual doesn't necessarily mean to be honorable or good, or moral. um, and it was then that I started hearing people saying things like, "Oh, but Reiki, you've got to watch Reiki because it's been corrupted." I'm thinking, really? Because my personal experience of it has only been good. I don't understand, but I took it on board, and I've always weighed it up. It was also when I first started having conversations with people about other forms of healing and started to notice that people were categorizing different forms of healing as better or worse than. And there was a lot of, again, one-upmanship that I came up against, where people say, "Oh, so you practice Reiki? Oh, right. Well, yeah, I practice angelic Reiki, so I work with the archangels, which means that my form of Reiki is actually really is much more powerful than the traditional form of Reiki." Or people saying, "Oh, yes, I practice Rahani. It is actually a much more powerful and much purer form of energy healing than Reiki." And I practice shamanic Reiki, and that's more grounded, and it's working with the earth and nature, and just any way to try and elevate their own form of healing over everything else. And even back then, when I was kind of new to all of this and quite naive about it all, I remember thinking, but it doesn't matter what you call it. And of course, my background was working with basic energy healing, seeing that it worked without any proper name applied to it. It wasn't any lineage or modality. It was just put your hands on somebody, make a divine connection, make yourself a willing channel to receive energy for the benefit of the other person and send it to them. And I just couldn't get my head around anyone thinking that their form of energy healing was more powerful. If you're making a connection to the divine source of all things, to the highest energy available in this universe, which is what we're all doing as energy healers, or at least what we're meant to be doing. How can one person's healing be more powerful than somebody else's? Doesn't make any sense. How can one method be more powerful than another method if if power in it is from source, is from God, creator, whatever word you want to give that, energy. So I could see that there was this competitiveness and hierarchical thinking, which I just didn't agree with, and I still don't. I find it uncomfortable, and if I hear people talking like that, I step away. I just think, again, there's wounding there that means you have to try to to elevate yourself above other people or distinguish what you do as better. Don't have time for that. As somebody who seeks healing still from others, my only interest in finding a practitioner to work with is, do I feel safe with this person? Are they moral? Do they feel good? Are they grounded? Do they walk the talk? Have they been working on themselves? Do they seem to be sincerely keen to help me? And are they connecting with the divine source of all things? Those are my criteria to measure somebody by. And if I feel safe, I use my discernment to check whether I feel safe with somebody, and to be sure that I'm not maybe being bamboozled by a mask, which can happen and has happened. Most of the time, my intuition will tell me if somebody is a right fit for me, and equally, if I've worked with somebody for a few sessions of healing and it's always felt good, and then suddenly it doesn't feel good, then I'll stop going to see that person and we'll trust that. And I hope that anyone listening to this who's looking to find somebody, a practitioner to work with, or a methodology that they want to try, will tune into their intuition and work with that and their discernment, and listen for whether they feel safe around this person. And is there a glamour? Is somebody trying to present themselves in a certain way, or a little bit too slick? Um, or are they sincere? Do their words resonate? Does their energy feel comfortable to you? It's a way I'm used to thinking. I'm aware that not everybody is, but it would be the same for me if I was looking for a body worker, or someone to teach me how to play guitar. Do I connect with this person? Do they feel good? Is it someone I want to spend time with? And particularly with energy work or body work, is it somebody I want touching me or interacting with my energy field and affecting me emotionally or psychologically? You know, you're putting your trust in somebody's hands here. It's really important to make sure that you feel safe and that they have integrity and that you can feel that. So those are the things that were important to me, and it doesn't matter whether you call it fire Reiki or water Rahani or shamanic light energy healing, whatever you want to call it, as long as your intent is right, as long as you're connected, and as long as you're doing the work, and you're sincerely looking to help somebody, how can anyone else's be better than yours? It's yeah. Anyway, So I've had to deal with a lot of that in my life, and this grandstanding and one-upmanship from people. Although I'm never looking to push myself on anyone. Um, and my own practice with Reiki has developed and changed. And as I teach it, I always teach anyone who comes to learn it from me. This is the traditional form of Usui Reiki I was taught by my Usui Reiki teacher. So I'm giving it to you as it was given to me, but learn the traditional way of doing it by all means. But also, I think it's important to listen to your intuition again and be guided to make adjustments or edits or develop it so that it's a reflection of you and your soul and the stamp that you want to put on it, and it becomes your own method. Um, because I'm not a purist in the sense that I think there's only one way of doing things. Reiki is just one of many methods, and it's one that I love for a lot of reasons. But I've gone on since to learn shamanic healing, again, which is going back to ancient methods of working with energy and working with sound and working with healing. And there were elements of the shamanic healing that spoke to me more than some of the aspects of Reiki. So, for example, in Reiki, you learn about the chakra system, and the hand positions correspond with the chakras, the energy centers of the body. I learned it, I practiced it, and as I went on to learn shamanic healing, um, the form that I was taught, I learned that there are three centers of the body where energy pools, and they're called the cauldrons. So you've got the head cauldron, the heart cauldron, and the navel cauldron. And as soon as I heard that, it felt like an inner yes. This is my truth. This is something that I really resonate with, because that's where I experience my consciousness in different states. And when I'm overly mentalizing something, thinking, overthinking, I experience my consciousness to be in my head, and it can get a little bit top heavy and get uncomfortable. Um, and using the breath, you can direct your consciousness up and down through the body. You can move your consciousness to your heart, where you're experiencing life in a more emotional way. And if you want to really ground yourself into your lower energy centers in your body and experience life more in an intuitive way or an instinctual way, you would guide your consciousness using your breath into your navel cauldron. So now when I work with energy healing, when someone comes to me for Reiki or energy healing, I'm working with the cauldrons rather than with the chakras. And I'm other tweaks and other adjustments that I've made over the years that kind of make it a combination of all sorts of things that I picked up from different traditions that resonated with me and that I loved and that I felt worked. Um, so strictly speaking, I don't practice traditional Reiki anymore. I can if somebody asks for it. Otherwise, I do it my way. But there are elements of traditional Reiki which are still weaved into the way that I work and which I love. And it's still a bit of a challenge for me when I hear people say, "Oh yeah, Reiki, it's corrupted," because again, it's never been my experience that I've had bad Reiki from somebody, where I've come away from a Reiki session where I felt uncomfortable or like something negative happened. I've had healing sessions that I've come away from feeling destabilized with other people practicing different methods, but not Reiki. Although I know other people who have had bad Reiki and bad experiences, so of course their opinion is based on that experience and it's justified. Um, I had a conversation with somebody who I respect, who's a seer recently, who said that she believes that the whole Reiki lineage has been corrupted. And I argued that again, that's not been my experience. And her counter argument was, well, it depends on the practitioner. And if the practitioner is aligned in the right way and has the right intention, you could probably bypass anything that has been corrupted about the process. I think it's a moot point, and I keep returning to what's your intent? How do you feel in the company of the person who's practicing it? What are they connecting to? I think there are methods of healing out there that don't necessarily encourage connecting to Creator, that you're just pulling in energy from somewhere. I don't know. Certainly, the way that I was taught to do the basic hands-on energy healing that I started with, and the way that I was taught Reiki by my particular teacher, was that you are connecting to the divine source of all things, to God. But I understand not everybody is taught that way. So maybe that's why some people have experiences with Reiki or other methods where they come away feeling less than positive, because perhaps the person practicing hasn't anchored themselves in that alignment. Maybe. Um, but I can only speak as I find, and it's only ever been a beautiful and positive thing for me, and I've only ever observed it being that for others, and I continue to teach it and continue to thoroughly enjoy watching people being activated, discovering that they have this toolkit in their body, in their hands, in their heart, where they can put their hands on a pet or a loved one and make somebody feel better. For me, it's always just been profoundly helpful in terms of emotional support. I'm an emotional person. I'm a sensitive person. I experience life very much through my emotions, and I absorb a lot of other people's emotional stuff, especially doing therapeutic work. And if I didn't have a system that I could work with that would help me to clean myself of other people's energies and of my own heavier emotions, and to support myself emotionally in that way, then I would really, really have struggled. And Reiki's just been a wonderful tool for that for me. I can feel myself heavy with emotional weight of my own and other people's, and I can give myself or receive from somebody I trust an energy healing or a Reiki healing, and feel that all of that's been lifted off. Like, so much baggage is gone, and I've had an emotional spring clean, and mentally I feel clearer. And depending on how I've observed that depending on how somebody approaches life, they might receive a different benefit. So, for example, my beloved husband can tie himself in knots mentally because he's always analysing. That's his first mode of interaction with the world is through his mind. So he can get mentally quite burdened with clutter and find it very difficult to get clarity about what he needs to do next, and perhaps just get maybe a little bit anxious. You know, he's pretty grounded, so not often. But when he gets into that state, I'll get a nudge to offer him a treatment, and he's straight up on the couch, ready for it, and loves it. And has said to me before that for him, it's like all of his ducks line up, and he's suddenly able to see very clearly what the next step should be in terms of what business calls to make, and how to organise his life, and his ability to analyse becomes much easier, and that mental cotton wool is all cleared up. And it also, also helps on a physical level. And I've had experiences where I've had people in high level pain who are no longer in high level pain when I finish working with them. I don't take credit for that. It's not about me. And I'm very, very clear about that. I am a channel to receive divine energy. It's the divine energy that's doing the work, and it's that person's willingness to receive it and desire to heal as well. It's a combination of all three, really. It's always a partnership. But if I hadn't seen profound shifts in people over the years for the better, I wouldn't still be doing it 25 years later. And if I'd had experiences where I'd affected somebody for the worse using healing techniques, I would have stopped, because I'm not in it to hurt people. I'm in it to help. And yeah, like I say, it's been nothing but helpful for me. It was like my gateway drug into a whole world of energy healing, which I've only dived deeper and deeper and deeper into. And I now have, what I consider to be really deep techniques that can get to the root of an issue with people. But I still use Reiki and energy healing generally, basic hands-on energy healing, as a really important part of my toolkit to give comfort and to give gentle support to somebody who doesn't necessarily feel ready to dive in and do the deeper, more traumatic, confronting healing work. you know, Reiki can be, I have clients who've been coming to me regularly, not because they need me, or need Reiki to function, but because they value Reiki as a tool to have once every couple of weeks or once every couple of months, or however often it feels right for them, to support them with their mental and emotional health, with their spiritual health, the non-physical as well as the physical, and to help them stay in right alignment and connected, in a busy and chaotic world that's often pulling you in so many different directions. We don't often give ourselves time to check in with our mental and emotional health, or our spiritual health, our connection to the divine. Again, the word spiritual feels so limited, it always does. But I'm working with language as best I can to explain something that's abstract, and that's not always easy. So I don't know if I've reached any conclusions here. Certainly not trying to convince anybody of anything, but I feel there's a lot in question at the moment. I think a lot of people I love and know are experiencing that life feels chaotic, and that people are being called to question their beliefs in a way that perhaps they haven't for some time, or maybe ever. I think it's right and healthy to look at everything with a critical eye, and to consider and to question. And again, I can't knock anybody who's had a negative experience of Reiki, and I would always listen if someone had something to present along those lines and take it on board. But I can only say that's not been my experience, and that's why I still choose to continue to teach it. Always with the message to anyone who chooses to learn from me that it's not the be-all and end-all, it's not the only way, it's not the best way. It's just one way, and it's a good one if you use it properly. But you know, always encouraging people to find their own flavour and their own expression with that, and to mix in whatever feels right and make it theirs, as I've done. And it's been a while now that I've been receiving an intuitive nudge that I need to write my own form of energy healing course. It's there, it's percolating in the background. It's something I will do soon, to talk about the ways that I work it now, which are slightly different, a fair bit different now to the traditional Usui Reiki that I also teach. But I will continue to teach that because it's a traditional method that I still think works when you apply it properly, and really does have its uses. So if there's anything else you would like to know from me about this particular subject, please do reach out. Contact details are in the description box. And I hope that this in some way has been helpful. And as always, wishing anybody listening, certainly anyone who's had the patience to get this far, because I definitely didn't intend to go on for this long, wishing you all the best. Take care.